The grand hall of the Wei dynasty shimmered with light from crystal chandeliers that hung like stars above the polished floor. Alien nobles of every shape and color filled the room, their eyes flicking between one another in the center of attention. At the far end of the hall stood Captain Ryan Holt, a human in his sharp dark uniform. His posture was perfect, his hands clasped behind his back and his gaze steady, though he could feel the curious and judgmental eyes of dozens upon dozens of alien spectators. Princess Lyra Vey approached the dais, her long robes floating behind her like liquid silver. Her golden hair gleamed under the chandeliers, and her sharp violet eyes swept the crowd before settling on Ryan. She smiled, but it was a smile that promised mischief rather than warmth. "You there," she said, her voice carrying over the hall like a bell. "Do you call yourself a guard?" Her words were light, almost teasing, but the tone carried a sting that made the room quiet in anticipation. "You are human, correct? Surely your species is not known for strength or strategy. Tell me, how can you even stand here among us without faltering?" Ryan did not flinch. His jaw was tight, his face calm, giving nothing away. He had heard mockery before, of course. Humans were not considered equal by many alien societies. But this was different. This was the princess, publicly belittling him in front of everyone. Whispers started to ripple through the court, some chuckling quietly, some gasping in surprise, but Ryan remained silent. Lyra circled him slowly, her gaze sharp. "I have seen guards of every kind. Tall ones, strong ones, clever ones. But humans, you are so small, so fragile, and yet here you are. Do you think the throne would feel safer with you standing nearby?" She laughed lightly, a sound that echoed through the hall and drew more eyes toward them. The nobles around them began murmuring in agreement, enjoying the spectacle of a human being publicly humiliated. Yet Ryan held himself firm. He did not argue, he did not bow, and he did not look away. He simply stood, a silent figure amid the glittering court. Lyra leaned closer, her eyes narrowing playfully. "Do you even know how to wield a blade properly, human? Or are you here to trip over your own feet when danger comes?" Ryan's lips curled just slightly, a hint of a smile that he quickly suppressed. It was not arrogance, it was confidence. One had to be confident when the entire court expected them to fail. He thought of the training he had endured, the battles he had faced, the countless times he had protected people who underestimated him. This moment, though daunting, was nothing compared to what he had faced before. "Perhaps," Ryan said finally, his voice calm but steady. "I am not like the others you have seen. Perhaps you will see that I am capable in ways you do not yet understand." His words were soft, almost conversational, but carried a weight that seemed to make even Lyra pause for a heartbeat. The princess laughed again, more brightly this time, but there was a flicker of curiosity behind her amusement. "Bold," she said. "I admire boldness, though it is often foolish. We shall see, human. We shall see." She turned away then, allowing the court to breathe again, but she kept her eyes on him, following his movements as he adjusted his stance slightly. Still composed, still calm. The rest of the ceremony continued, but a quiet tension had settled between Ryan and Lyra. She was intrigued now, not by his appearance but by the way he carried himself. The other nobles noticed too, some shifting uncomfortably as the human guard refused to bow to their expectations. By the time the ceremony ended, Ryan had returned to his post near the palace gates, standing as tall and still as before. Lyra approached him once more, though this time in private. She studied him silently for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You are different," she said finally. "Perhaps there is more to your kind than I thought." Ryan inclined his head slightly, not saying a word. He did not need to. The message was clear. He would earn respect not through flattery or words, but through actions. Lyra, meanwhile, walked away, leaving a seed of curiosity behind that would grow in ways neither of them could yet predict. The first day of the human guard at the Wei dynasty palace ended, but neither Ryan nor Lyra truly left the moment behind. The air still hummed with the echo of their encounter, and the court whispered of the human who had stood proud, unshaken, and unbroken. The princess, who had mocked him before everyone, now carried a quiet question in her mind. What was this human truly capable of? The days after the ceremony passed quietly at first, but tension lingered like a shadow over the palace. Ryan continued his duties with precision, patrolling corridors and monitoring entrances, his presence calm but alert. The nobles often glanced at him, some still amused by the earlier encounter, others uncertain about the human's place in the court. Lyra, however, began watching him more closely. She did not approach him yet, but her violet eyes followed him from across the hall, noting how he moved, how he observed, how he remained composed no matter the situation. Then the call came. A mission to a nearby planetary system had been planned weeks before, a routine diplomatic trip meant to strengthen alliances. Lyra was to attend, and Ryan would be assigned to guard her throughout the journey. The shuttle prepared for departure, engines humming softly, the crew busy with final checks. Lyra stepped aboard, her robes flowing behind her, and cast a quick glance at Ryan. "You will not get in my way, human," she said lightly, a smirk playing on her lips. Her tone was sharp, yet there was something almost curious beneath it. Ryan simply nodded, offering no words, his expression calm. The shuttle lifted into the sky and accelerated into space, leaving the planet behind. The journey was long, the silence punctuated only by the steady hum of the engines and the occasional clatter of instruments. Lyra, seated in her private cabin, glanced at Ryan several times, noting the way he checked systems, monitored sensors, and moved through the narrow corridors with quiet precision. She had expected a human to be clumsy, uncertain, even timid, yet this one seemed different. Suddenly, alarms blared through the shuttle, sharp and insistent. Red lights flashed, casting a harsh glow over the crew. "Pirates!" shouted one of the alien engineers. The ship rocked violently as warning sirens echoed through the hull. Lyra's eyes widened, and her hand gripped the edge of her chair. Ryan moved immediately, his mind calculating the safest path for her and the crew. "Stay close to me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Follow my lead." There was no hesitation, no panic, only focus. Lyra froze for a moment, surprised by the authority in his tone. Then instinctively she moved toward him. The first wave of attackers appeared on the shuttle's screens, sleek ships darting through space like predatory insects. Ryan directed the pilot to maneuver while he assessed the situation, issuing orders that were clear and precise. "Left flank, evasive pattern 3. Shields at 50%. Prepare countermeasures." The crew followed without question, their trust in him immediate, as if they had known him for years. Lyra watched, her earlier mockery forgotten as Ryan took control of the crisis. His mind worked faster than any protocol she had ever seen, and his actions kept them safe even as the enemy closed in. He moved through the shuttle, checking vital systems, reinforcing security, and calming panicked crew members. At one point, a small explosion rocked the corridor near Lyra's cabin. Without hesitation, Ryan dived forward, blocking her from debris and guiding her to safety. By the time the attackers were repelled, the shuttle had sustained damage but remained intact. The crew was shaken but unharmed. Lyra stood beside Ryan in the control room, her violet eyes wide with disbelief. She had expected a human to falter, to need protection, yet this one had protected everyone with skill and courage beyond her imagining. You handled that," she said, her voice low, almost uncertain. "Better than anyone I would have expected." Ryan did not boast, did not claim credit. He simply nodded. "I did what I had to do. That is my duty." His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the adrenaline still coursing through the room. Lyra studied him, trying to reconcile the human she had mocked with the one who had just saved her life and the lives of many others. As the shuttle continued its journey, Lyra could not stop thinking about him. She had expected fear, weakness, and uncertainty, but instead she had seen precision, courage, and intelligence, a part of her that she rarely acknowledged, the part that valued strength and reliability, felt an unexpected respect growing for him. She did not yet understand it, and she would not admit it aloud, but she could not ignore it. Ryan, meanwhile, returned to his position near her cabin, scanning the corridor as usual. He did not speak of the attack, did not seek praise. His focus remained on duty, on ensuring her safety and on observing the subtle shift. As in the princess's behavior, he noticed the way she glanced at him from time to time, the faint tightening of her fingers when danger approached, and the brief pause in her sharp remarks after he acted. The mission ended without further incident, and the shuttle returned to the palace. Lyra disembarked quietly, her mind still turning over the events of the journey. Ryan followed as always, silent, steady, unshaken. That night, as the palace lights dimmed and the court slept, one thought remained in Lyra's mind. The human she had mocked was far more capable than she had ever imagined, and the next time she saw him, she would not be able to ignore that truth. The days after the shuttle mission were quieter, yet a subtle tension hung in the palace. Whispers circulated among the nobles, some admiring the human guard, others still scoffing at his presence. Ryan returned to his usual duties, patrolling corridors and observing the palace with the same careful attention as always. Every step he took was measured, every gesture controlled, and yet there was a quiet intensity in his gaze that made even the most confident aliens pause. Lyra observed him from a distance. She no longer mocked him openly, but curiosity and a new sense of intrigue colored her glances. She saw how he interacted with the palace staff, how he ensured the younger guards were safe, and how he maintained order without demanding attention. A part of her, one she rarely admitted, respected his composure and skill. She had expected to find him clumsy, limited, and uncertain. Yet each day he proved otherwise. A new crisis arose when a group of alien diplomats arrived unexpectedly for urgent negotiations. The palace was crowded, and tension ran high. Ryan stood by Lyra's side as she entered the meeting chamber, ensuring no disturbance could threaten her. The diplomats eyed him skeptically, murmuring under their breath about the human guard. Lyra noticed their expressions and quietly smirked to herself. This time, however, her amusement was private. She had begun to understand that appearances could be deceiving. During the negotiations, Ryan's vigilance proved invaluable. One of the diplomats attempted a subtle act of sabotage, slipping a coded message into the palace communications. Ryan noticed it immediately, his training and instincts alerting him to the threat. He intercepted the message, quietly securing it without drawing attention. Lyra, aware of what he had done, felt a surge of admiration. She realized that his intelligence and judgment were unmatched by most of the beings in the room. After the negotiations ended successfully, Lyra invited Ryan to walk with her through the palace gardens. It was unusual. She rarely sought his presence beyond official duty. The gardens were quiet, bathed in the soft light of the twin moons. Ryan remained alert, scanning the area as they walked, but he kept his distance, giving her space. "You were impressive during the negotiations," Lyra said, her tone softer than usual. She did not look directly at him, instead focusing on the path ahead. "I did not expect a human to notice such things. Most would be distracted or intimidated." Ryan glanced at her briefly, then returned his gaze to the surroundings. "I have to pay attention," he said simply. "It is my responsibility to ensure your safety and the security of the palace. I do not judge by appearances." Lyra considered his words. There was a quiet strength in them, a calm assurance that she could not ignore. She had spent her life surrounded by beings who relied on status, appearances, or fear to command respect. Here was someone who demanded none of those things, yet earned it all through actions. A small part of her chest tightened with the realization that she had underestimated him for too long. Their walk continued in silence, the soft rustle of leaves, and the distant sound of a fountain filling the quiet spaces between them. Lyra's thoughts wandered to the shuttle mission, to the pirates, and to how the human had moved without hesitation to protect her and the crew. That memory lingered in her mind, not with anger or resentment, but with a reluctant acknowledgement of his courage. "You seem different from others," Lyra said after a moment, her voice almost a whisper. "Most beings I meet are concerned with power or position. You do what is right, not what is expected." Ryan's gaze met hers briefly, steady and calm. "I do not do it for praise," he said. "I do it because it is the right thing to do. That is enough for me." Lyra nodded slowly, turning her eyes back to the moonlit gardens. There was an unfamiliar warmth in her chest, a feeling she could not name. She had always thought of humans as weaker, less capable, and yet here was one whose courage, intelligence, and calm had left an impression she could not dismiss. For the first time, she felt a spark of something new, an awareness that perhaps her previous judgments were wrong. They returned to the palace without another word, but the walk had changed something in their relationship. Lyra no longer saw him as just a human guard. She began to notice his subtle ways of observing, his careful decisions, and the quiet integrity that guided every action. And Ryan, as always, remained professional, aware of her presence but never overstepping, always ready, always vigilant. That night, as Lyra looked out of her window at the stars, she found her thoughts wandering to him. The human she had once mocked, the one she had expected to falter, had proven himself in ways that mattered. A question lingered in her mind, unspoken and unacknowledged. What else was he capable of, and could she trust him? Not just as a guard, but as someone who might one day stand beside her as an equal. The palace slept, but neither Ryan nor Lyra truly rested that night. A quiet bond had begun to form, one built on respect, courage, and unspoken understanding. And although neither of them realized it fully yet, the events of that day had set in motion a connection that would shape the days to come. The palace was quiet in the early morning, but a sense of unease had settled over the corridors. Whispers of danger had reached the princess's ears, and Ryan, as always, was alert. He moved steadily through the halls, observing the guards and staff, ensuring that no threat could go unnoticed. His presence was calm but commanding, and even the most confident palace attendants gave him a respectful nod as he passed. Lyra followed from a distance, her curiosity now more evident than ever. She had begun to notice details she had ignored before, the way he anticipated potential hazards, the subtle checks of every door and corridor, the way he always positioned himself where he could see and protect. It was not only skill that impressed her, but thoughtfulness, a quality she had rarely encountered. Suddenly, the palace alarms rang out, shattering the morning calm. Red lights flashed, and the automated voice announced an unauthorized entry. Ryan's eyes narrowed, and without hesitation he moved toward the source of the disturbance. Lyra hurried to keep up, her heart pounding not from fear, but from anticipation. She had learned that whenever Ryan moved, he did so with purpose, and she trusted that he would act decisively. The threat revealed itself quickly. Masked figures moving through the lower halls, armed and silent, intent on causing harm. Ryan assessed the situation instantly, noting the number of intruders and their positions. He signaled to nearby guards, coordinating their movements silently, a leader in every sense. Lyra, usually commanding herself, now found herself following his lead, instinctively staying near him. Ryan moved with precision, intercepting one of the intruders before he could reach the upper floors. The human guard's actions were swift, but measured, subduing the threat without unnecessary force. Another intruder attempted to slip past, but Ryan anticipated the move, blocking the corridor and forcing the figure to surrender. Lyra watched, astonished by his skill and composure. Each decision he made was deliberate, each action calculated to ensure safety and minimize harm. They reached a section of the palace where the intruders had trapped a few of the junior guards. Ryan quickly assessed the best way to free them, directing Lyra to guide the frightened guards to safety. She followed his instructions without hesitation, amazed at the trust she felt in his judgment. His calm confidence had a strange effect on her, making her own fear and pride fall away in the presence of his competence. When the last of the intruders was contained, Ryan and Lyra paused to catch their breath. The young guards looked at Ryan with awe, while Lyra's eyes reflected something different, respect mixed with a growing admiration she did not yet fully understand. She had mocked him once, expecting weakness, but now she saw strength, intelligence, and courage all wrapped into one person. "You handled that well," she said quietly, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Better than anyone else here could have." Ryan did not smile, but his eyes met hers steadily. "It is my duty," he said simply. "I do not act for praise, only to protect." His words carried a weight of sincerity that resonated deeply with her. For a long moment, Lyra studied him, realizing that his courage was not born from arrogance but from principle. The palace staff began to gather, murmuring among themselves about the human guard who had defended them so efficiently. Lyra noticed their reactions, but her attention remained on Ryan. She was beginning to understand that he was more than just a protector. He was someone she could rely on, someone whose skill and character commanded trust without needing to demand it. As the morning progressed, Ryan escorted Lyra back to her chambers, remaining vigilant. She walked beside him, her mind still turning over the events of the attack. She remembered the way he moved, the calmness in his eyes, and the way he had guided everyone safely through danger. There was a quiet power in him, the kind that did not need to boast or threaten. For the first time, Lyra felt a strange mix of admiration and curiosity. She had expected to see flaws, weaknesses, and fear, but instead she saw confidence, intelligence, and unwavering integrity. She found herself wanting to understand him better, to see how his mind worked, and perhaps to be near him even when there was no threat to face. Ryan, meanwhile, remained professional, alert, and silent. He noticed the subtle changes in her demeanor, the way she now observed him differently, with a mixture of respect and cautious curiosity. He did not assume she understood or acknowledged it fully, but he recognized the shift, and it confirmed that trust was beginning to grow between them. By the time the palace returned to its usual rhythm, a quiet bond had formed. The human guard and the alien princess had faced danger together, and each had witnessed qualities in the other that could not be ignored. Lyra, who had once mocked him openly before the court, now regarded him with a quiet, unspoken recognition of his strength. And Ryan, as always, remained steady, prepared to protect, ready for what challenges the future might bring. The day ended with a lingering tension, one that was no longer entirely about fear or duty, but about the respect and understanding growing between them. Neither spoke of it aloud, but both felt the change. What had begun as mockery was slowly transforming into something neither could yet name, and the palace, unaware of the subtle shift, continued on, oblivious to the bond forming in its quiet corridors. The palace was alive with activity as the day of the royal celebration approached. Delegates from neighboring planets arrived, bringing exotic gifts and elaborate greetings. The corridors buzzed with preparations, and the court seemed more colorful and chaotic than ever. Ryan moved through it all with calm efficiency, observing every detail, ensuring that nothing threatened the princess or the palace itself. Lyra walked beside him at times, her attention split between supervising the preparations and watching the human who had begun to occupy more space in her thoughts than she cared to admit. She no longer mocked him openly, but a quiet curiosity had taken root. His calm presence had a strange effect on her, making her feel safer, and perhaps even intrigued. During the reception, a high-ranking alien minister approached, his eyes narrowing as he observed Ryan. "A human guard?" he said, his voice laced with disdain. "Are you certain the princess wishes for someone of such limited capability to be by her side during these events?" He smiled arrogantly, expecting Lyra to nod in agreement. To the surprise of the court, Lyra spoke up. "Ryan has proven himself," she said, her voice steady. "He has saved lives, maintained order, and demonstrated skill that far exceeds your expectations. His loyalty and intelligence are not to be questioned." A hush fell over the assembly. The minister's smile faltered as he looked between Lyra and Ryan, realizing that the princess had chosen to defend the human publicly. Ryan, as always, remained calm, his posture firm, neither seeking praise nor appearing uncomfortable under the attention. He simply nodded in acknowledgement, letting Lyra's words carry their meaning. The minister, unable to counter the princess's words without losing face, stepped back reluctantly. The court began to murmur, some in admiration, some in surprise. Lyra felt a quiet satisfaction as she saw the respect in the eyes of those who had doubted him. For the first time, she realized that Ryan was not just a capable guard. He was someone who could command respect without arrogance, simply by being who he was. Later, in the privacy of her chambers, Lyra reflected on the events of the day. She paced slowly, considering the human who had stood beside her through danger, who had proven his skill, and who had earned her trust. She had mocked him once, expecting weakness, but now she saw strength, courage, and intelligence that she could not ignore. A new question began to form in her mind. What did it mean to rely on someone like him? And more importantly, what did it mean to want him near? Not just for protection, but for his presence itself. Ryan knocked lightly at her door before entering, as he always did with respect. He had been at the edge of the celebration, observing, ensuring that no further threats disrupted the proceedings. "Is everything in order, princess?" he asked calmly. Lyra regarded him quietly for a moment. Yes, she replied, her voice soft. Thanks to you. She realized, almost reluctantly, that she felt a warmth in her chest whenever he was near. She could not explain it fully, and she did not try. Instead, she focused on the fact that she trusted him implicitly, something she had never done for anyone before. The days that followed were a mix of courtly duties and private observations. Lyra found herself watching Ryan more often, noticing how he anticipated potential problems, how he guided junior guards, and how he remained calm under pressure. She began to seek his advice in subtle ways, asking his opinion on security measures or the arrangement of the guests, always careful to maintain her pride, yet curious about his perspective. Ryan responded as he always did, calmly, thoughtfully, and without expectation of reward. His answers were precise and practical, but there was an awareness in his gaze, a recognition that he understood her, perhaps better than she realized. Lyra felt an unusual sense of comfort in his presence, a feeling she could not dismiss. One evening, as the palace lights dimmed and the corridors emptied, Lyra approached him quietly in the garden. The twin moons cast silver light over the fountains and flowers, and the air was cool and fragrant. "Ryan," she began, hesitating for a rare moment, "I want you to know—" "I appreciate what you do, not only your duty but everything you have done to protect and guide us." Ryan looked at her steadily, his expression calm, neither boastful nor surprised. "I do not expect gratitude," he said simply. "It is my responsibility. That is all." Lyra smiled faintly, a warmth in her eyes that had never been there before. "Perhaps," she said softly, "but I still wanted you to know. You have earned it. More than that, you have earned my trust." Ryan inclined his head slightly, acknowledging her words. He did not press for more, nor did he respond with unnecessary commentary. The trust was mutual, unspoken but fully understood. Lyra felt a quiet relief, a sense of clarity she had not anticipated. For the first time, she realized that she could rely on him not just as a guard, but as someone whose presence brought reassurance, someone who could stand beside her in a way that mattered. That night, as the palace slept, the bond between the princess and the human guard grew stronger. It was subtle, quiet, and unspoken, yet it was real. Lyra, who had once mocked him openly before the court, now regarded him with a newfound respect and curiosity. And Ryan, as always, remained steady, vigilant, and ready for whatever challenges the future might bring. A week had passed since the royal celebration, and the palace had returned to its normal rhythm. Yet the air carried a quiet tension, as if something unseen waited just beyond the walls. Ryan moved through the corridors as always, alert and steady, his eyes scanning every corner, every doorway, every shadow. Lyra followed at a distance, though not out of duty, more out of habit and curiosity. She found herself drawn to his presence, to the calm assurance he carried with every step. A new threat had emerged from the neighboring systems. Reports of hostile forces gathering near the outer planets reached the Palace Council, and the princess was placed at the center of urgent strategic meetings. Ryan stood by her side as they convened in the war room, his gaze sharp, his mind analyzing every detail on the holographic maps. Lyra noted how he anticipated moves, calculated risks, and remained composed while others around them shifted nervously. During the meeting, Lyra noticed a strange tension in her own chest. She had trusted him before, admired him even, but now a deeper awareness had taken root. She realized that she did not just want him nearby for protection. She wanted his presence because it brought her clarity, calm, and confidence. Her pride kept her silent, but the feeling would not be denied. After the council dispersed, Lyra found herself walking toward the private balcony overlooking the city below. The twin moons reflected on the rooftops, painting silver streaks across the marble. Ryan followed quietly, as he always did, his steps soundless on the polished floor. For a long moment they stood in silence, the only sounds the distant hum of the city and the soft rustle of the night wind. "I need your advice," Lyra said finally, her voice soft but deliberate. Ryan turned to her, alert and attentive, ready for any concern she might present. "Not about guards or strategy," she continued, "but about decisions. Difficult ones." Ryan tilted his head slightly, listening. "I am here to help," he said calmly. "In any way I can." Lyra hesitated, the weight of her words pressing against her pride. She had spent her life commanding, directing, and making choices for the realm. Yet here she was, asking for guidance from someone she had once mocked. She began, then stopped, taking a deep breath. I want you to stay with me. Not just as a guard, but because I want to, because I trust you. Ryan's expression remained calm, but his eyes revealed a quiet understanding. He had anticipated loyalty, respect, even admiration, but this was different. This was a personal request from the princess herself. Without speaking, he inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the depth of her words. He understood the gravity of the trust she was placing in him. Lyra continued, her voice firmer now. You have earned more than respect, Ryan. You have earned my confidence, my trust, and my presence near me. I cannot explain why, but I need you here. Not because I fear, but because I want you to be beside me. Ryan remained silent, allowing her words to settle between them. There was no hesitation, no arrogance, only a steady calm that reassured her. Finally, he spoke softly. I will stay, Princess Lyra. Not because I must, but because I choose to. I will stand beside you as you ask. Relief and something warmer than relief filled Lyra's chest. For the first time, she realized that her pride had not been a barrier, but a shield she no longer needed. She had chosen to acknowledge the human not just as a guard, but as someone whose presence mattered in a personal, meaningful way. The words hung in the air, unspoken but understood. A bond now declared through trust and choice rather than command or duty. That night they walked through the palace gardens, the soft moonlight reflecting off the fountains and casting long shadows across the marble paths. Lyra no longer felt the need to assert her authority. She walked beside Ryan as an equal, feeling the reassurance of his presence and the confidence that came with knowing he would remain steadfast, no matter what the future held. The palace seemed quieter than usual, yet alive with possibilities. Lyra realized that she had crossed a threshold, one that had taken pride, curiosity, and admiration, and transformed it into a personal connection founded on trust. Ryan, ever steady and vigilant, had become more than a guard. He had become someone she could rely on, someone she had chosen for herself, not just for her safety, but for the certainty he brought to her life. In that moment, Lyra understood something profound. The human she had once mocked before the court was no longer simply a protector. He had become a partner of sorts, someone whose strength, intelligence, and calm presence she now depended on willingly. And Ryan, for his part, understood the depth of her trust and would honor it silently, faithfully as he had always done. As they returned to the palace, the stars above shimmered quietly, reflecting the bond that had formed between human and princess. It was unspoken yet undeniable. Lyra, who had once mocked him in front of everyone, had now asked for him herself. And Ryan, steady as ever, had chosen to stay, standing silently beside her, ready for whatever challenges the galaxy might send next. The palace was calm in the early morning, but the air carried a sense of anticipation. Today, the Council of Allied Planets would meet in the Grand Hall, and Lyra was expected to preside over the proceedings. Ryan moved beside her as always, his eyes scanning the room, noting every detail, every movement, every subtle sign of disturbance. The court had learned to respect him, but today there would be no doubt in anyone's mind of his capability. As the delegates arrived, Lyra's violet eyes followed Ryan. She no longer felt curiosity alone. There was a quiet pride in her gaze. She had asked him to stay by her side, and he had chosen to do so not out of obligation but willingly. That choice had forged a connection that neither of them had fully realized until now. Ryan's presence was steadying, and it gave her a confidence she had never felt before. The meeting began, and tensions quickly rose. A disagreement between two planetary leaders threatened to derail negotiations. Voices grew louder, gestures more aggressive. Ryan remained calm, observing, ready to act if necessary. Lyra noticed the tension in his shoulders, the alertness in his stance, and the quiet authority in his eyes. He did not interfere, but the confidence he projected reassured her, allowing her to maintain control over the room. One of the leaders attempted a subtle act of intimidation, questioning the wisdom of Lyra keeping a human guard. The room's attention shifted, expecting hesitation or embarrassment from the princess. Instead, she stood taller, her gaze unwavering, and motioned toward Ryan. He has proven himself, she said clearly. He has protected this palace, its people, and me through challenges that none of you would dare face. He is more than capable. His judgment and loyalty are unquestionable. I trust him. The hall went silent. Delegates whispered among themselves, astonished at her public declaration. Ryan, as always, remained composed, acknowledging her words with a quiet nod, letting her endorsement carry their weight. Lyra's voice carried authority, tempered with respect, and it changed the room. The council understood that this was no longer a matter of status or species. It was about competence, trust, and honor. After the meeting, Lyra led Ryan to a quiet corridor overlooking the gardens. The moonlight reflected off the marble floor, casting long shadows around them. For a moment there was silence, and neither of them spoke. The events of the day had tested patience, diplomacy, and strength, and yet here they were, together, steady and unshaken. "You handled yourself well today," Lyra said softly, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Not just the council, but everything." She paused, searching for the words. "I trust you completely, Ryan. Not because of duty, but because I choose to." Ryan's calm eyes met hers. "I understand," he said, "and I will continue to stand by you, not because it is required, but because it is my choice as well. You can rely on me now and in the future." Lyra felt a warmth in her chest she had not expected. She realized that this was more than trust. It was a bond built on mutual respect, understanding, and quiet admiration. The human she had once mocked before the court had become someone she could depend on completely, someone whose presence brought reassurance and strength. The palace lights dimmed as they walked through the gardens, and Lyra reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the moment she had mocked him publicly, she had watched him quietly, learning, observing, and proving himself in ways that could not be ignored. He had faced danger, handled crises, and earned respect not through words but through actions. And now she had asked for him personally, and he had chosen to remain. Ryan, as always, remained composed, yet he sensed the change in her demeanor. He had seen the respect and admiration grow over time, but now it had deepened into something personal. Their bond was no longer solely about duty. It was about trust, understanding, and the quiet assurance that they could face anything together. The night grew deeper, and the stars above reflected on the calm waters of the fountains. Lyra turned to Ryan, her expression softening. "You have changed the way I see humans," she admitted. "And perhaps you have changed the way I see myself." Ryan inclined his head slightly, acknowledging her words with quiet humility. "Strength and courage are not limited by species," he said. "They are shown through actions. You have recognized that." For the first time, Lyra smiled fully, not as a princess commanding respect, but as someone who had learned, grown, and discovered trust in an unexpected place. Ryan's presence beside her was no longer just about protection. It was about partnership, understanding, and mutual respect. The palace seemed to breathe with quiet approval, the corridors echoing with the calm of a bond now solidified. Lyra, who had once mocked him before everyone, now looked at him with respect, trust, and quiet admiration. And Ryan, ever vigilant and steady, stood by her side, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. Together, they returned to the palace side by side, knowing that the past had shaped them, the present had solidified their connection, and the future, whatever it might hold, would be faced together, with courage, trust, and unwavering resolve.